Welcome back once again. Friends, in the work that I do as a Chabad rabbi, I receive all types of call at all hours of the day. After all, isn't Chabad the Google for everything Jewish? Like a 5 a.m. call. Hey, is this Chabad? Hey, Rabbi, I'm on the highway near Nashville. I had a tire blowout. Where can I find a mechanic? And I'm thinking to myself, why can't he check Google? Yet, he calls Chabad at 5 a.m. Another one is, hey, Rabbi, I'm in town for my anniversary. Maybe you can suggest a nice, beautiful, romantic, kosher steakhouse in Nashville? I tell him, you might got to go about 240 miles away and all the way to Atlanta. And their jaws drop. As he says, that's exactly where I'm coming from. So recently, I received a very interesting question. It says, hey, Rabbi, are you the Chabad rabbi? I say, yeah. He goes, listen, if prayer is all about the spiritual connection with God and the feeling about God in my heart, Rabbi, why should I come to synagogue to pray? I mean, why does it matter where I pray? Why does prayer need a designated space, a physical space, to experience a close connection to God? I mean, Rabbi, don't you remember just a short while ago during COVID, we had all those prayers in my living room, in my kitchen? I mean, I just love that spirituality that I brought into my home. Hey, and also the fact that my husband wasn't always running out to evening services at the most critical hour to pray. And I thought about it. Because, friends, this woman actually expressed her positive outlook on home-based prayer. But essentially, she was also asking a very key question about the need of the institution of a synagogue, of a shul. And this question, wow, fits so well and so relevant to this week as we're going to read in the Torah the portion about the building of the sanctuary. It is actually the beginning of a 5-portion marathon, which is dedicated entirely to the very detailed instruction of the construction of the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. It was actually a home for God and everything related to it. And there's no topic to which the Torah devotes more real estate. That means more verses and text. Where it gives us in the entire Torah, we don't have so much details about any project. Here we have the details of the dimensions of every beam, the length and breadth of every curtain, the thread composition of every strand and every color, which is going to be used in this beautiful grand home for God. Yet, the concept of a house for God is seemingly a fundamental contradiction in terms when you say house is physical and it's limited to a dimension. God is spiritual and infinite. It's almost like a contradiction. A house for God? I mean, why is it infinite God confining himself to this very small, specific space, a finite space, telling us exactly how to be part of it? I mean, the square footage of the Holy of Holies, the size of the Holy Ark, the dimensions of the gold, the copper, the altar, the elaborate details of the menorah, the showbread table. I mean, like a mortal home builder sitting with an architect and fussing over the colors of the upholstery of the living room, the couch. Why do we need to even have all these details? 13 columns in the Torah. And this actually question even deepens. Because in addition to the infinite God designating one place where he is, once the Mishkan, this tabernacle, was built, do you know that that was the only place where Jews were allowed to worship him? The only place where they can bring offerings on the altar? Nowhere else? I mean, before this, you can worship God here, you can worship God there, you can bring sacrifice anywhere. Look in the Torah. Noah built an altar on the side of the ark on the Mount Ararat, which is present-day Turkey, when he came out of the ark. Abraham brought sacrifices in the Negev in the south of Israel. Jews brought sacrifices at the Mount of Mount Sinai before receiving the Torah. Friends, do you know what happened? Once they built this Mishkan, this tabernacle, the house for God, private altars were actually forbidden. You know what it means, forbidden? Sacrifices couldn't be brought anywhere else, only in the Mishkan. And eventually, the courtyard of its successor, once the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was over, they built a holy temple in Jerusalem. I mean, what does this mean? How could an infinite God be confined to this finite, limited space? Another question. Ever since Jerusalem became the location of the temple, Jews around the world make sure to face in that direction when they pray 3 times a day. Right here in Nashville, I'm facing east now because that's the direction of Jerusalem. Hey, but God's right here in my library. What difference does it make if I face Jerusalem, Johannesburg or Miami, which, by the way, some call the land of our forefathers. I mean, does God hear us any less if I'm facing south or north or west instead of east? God forbid. And you know, Moses himself asked this question. The Midrash actually states that when God commanded him to build a Mishkan, Moshe turned to God and he says, "You, God, you fill all of the higher worlds, all of the lower worlds, but you're instructing me to build a finite Mishkan?" On the one hand, God is infinite. On the other hand, God is commanding us to build a house where he can be found just there. What does all this mean? Well, there's a classic answer. The classic answer is actually, it's not God who needs this house, but us. God needs us because he wants us to have a home where we can approach God. What does it mean? He needs an appropriate place, an appropriate atmosphere. I mean, we are mortals. We live in a muddied existence of a physical universe. We're preoccupied with the rush of everything going on around us, here, there, all these errands. And, you know, we view reality through a very peculiar, defined, and limited lens of this world. So because God becomes somewhat of an abstract idea, so for us to access him and have a spiritual experience, you know, okay, we need something. We need somewhere to remind us of life's light and help us pull us out of the muck of life, the pressures of life. We find a confined space. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, and today, which we would call the synagogue, serves this purpose. Many tell of a spiritual feeling they're experiencing when they're praying at the Western Wall. They go to the wall, they feel a holy place. I mean, the truth is, there's something about standing on that soil, facing those ancient, storied, tear-stained stones of the Western Wall. It actually evokes a millennia sense of connection to Jewish history, tradition, and God himself. And by the same token, there's a feeling when in your home or right here in Nashville, you walk into the synagogue during the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the ark is bedecked in its special white curtain. It evokes a sense of purity, a sense of holiness of the season, and the solemnity of the hour. The flickering candles of the Ner Tamid, the Bima, the Torah with its shiny silver crowns. All of this transmit to the heart a feeling that you don't get in the corner of your living room or in your library. The sanctuary is quiet like a sanctuary of sacred purity, a sanctuary from all the challenges of life. As Maimonides, the famed scholar, writes in his Moreh Nevuchim, he writes that the divine sanctuary, the sanctuary which had the holy ark inside, with the 2 tablets from Mount Sinai, with the cherubim perched on top of it, and all the other features and furnishings, actually serves to evoke fervor in the heart of whoever enters it, and a profound awe and fear of God. Friends, they tell the story of Franz Joseph I, the Emperor of Austria, for nearly 70 years, from the year 1848 until the year 1921. He was one of the most influential world leaders of his time. He had a significant hand in shaping the European continent as we know it. He had a dream. He said he wants to build this big, grand opera house in Vienna, one that's going to be known throughout the entire world as a center of culture, a center of enlightenment, which would bring prestige to his nation on the international stage. And that's going to preserve his legacy for generations to come. The greatest architects in Europe were commissioned for this project. And after 5 long years of construction, this beautiful, magnificent, grand structure was completed. And the city prepared for a big gala dedication ceremony and a musical performance to be attended by the king and queen themselves. That awesome evening arrived, and thousands of people were waiting at the entrance. Loud cheers erupted when the royal carriage arrived, and everyone waited with bated breath for the proceedings to begin. Friends, lo and behold, to everyone's surprise, when the door to the king's carriage opened, before the king even stepped foot on the ground, he launched into a tirade, raising his voice and deriding the whole of the opera house and those who designed it. And he said, "Imbeciles," he carried on, You call this an opera house? A building like this is not befitting for this empire, and by no means will it carry my name. Everyone was shocked. What did the king find so offensive? The king, it turns out, had some very specific ideas of how an opera house is supposed to function. And this place wasn't going to cut it. You see, friends, the entrance was level with the ground. And thus, the main hall was situated on the first floor, with no elevation required to ascend into this cultural home. And this the emperor, the king, couldn't tolerate. Because an opera, the king explained, is a place that is supposed to uplift the audience with spiritual music. You can't just walk right in with your muddy boots right off the street into the opera hall. First, he says, you're supposed to walk up several flights of stairs to enter the building. Then, you're supposed to deposit your galoshes, your umbrella, and your coat on the first floor. And then as you make your way up each successive floor, you go further and further away from your hectic daily life and closer to the sanctuary experience that awaits. Because elevation and transcendence, the king said, is what an opera is all about. Friends, if this is the case, when a king of flesh and blood and a house of human creation and art, how much more so with the sublime home of the King of all kings. You don't talk to God the same way you talk to man. One must undergo a process of removal from the world to be able to access the court of the divine. You've got to walk up the stairs, floor by floor, slowly, steadily decompressing. Only then can you hear and really appreciate the music that is the divine symphony and the godly opera of existence. Now, though this technically answers our question, we haven't yet reached the depth of the Mishkan's purpose, of the purpose of this Mishkan, of this tabernacle. Yes, the Mishkan is our sanctuary. It's our sanctuary where we can transcend life's banalities. However, when commanding Moshe to build a Mishkan, God says, which means, you shall make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell in it. I mean, if the whole point of the sanctuary was for us, why didn't God say, make a sanctuary for yourselves, and I will dwell in it? Evidently, even as the Mishkan and the synagogue are here for us, there's something inherently divine about it. Because God says, V'yasu li mikdash, make for me a sanctuary. Friends, the Rebbe, in his teaching Likutei Sichos, Volume 3, offers a most profound explanation, an approach that helps us truly appreciate what the function of the Mishkan was and what it is today. A means for each and every one of us to build a personal Mishkan in our own lives. Because, friends, the existence of a Mishkan, a designated physical and finite place for divine revelation, speaks to a profound truth of existence. It teaches us that the most important fact that physical matter is no mere physical. Because inside of what looks ordinary tables and chairs of a synagogue, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Precisely, on a certain level, only therein can we access the greatest divine light of all. Because we are trained to think of spiritual experiences in terms of our thoughts, our hearts, our childhood memories, or maybe perhaps a life-changing experience. The more abstract, the more spiritual. Music, poetry, love, feelings, flames, soul. But the truth, friends, is just the opposite. You know where God is found most? In stuff, in things, in matters, in material. Because God is manifest most in the gold, and the silver, and the copper, and the wool, and the linen, and the cedar wood that we use to build a Mishkan. There you will find a most overwhelming degree of divine energy that cannot be found anywhere else, not even in the most profound prayer or the deepest lecture of the Torah. The higher something is, the lower it falls. Right there, in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan made by Moshe, or in the holy temple later on made by King Solomon, or in the synagogues and the shuls that we all pray in, and in the sanctuaries made by us in and of our lives. Right there percolates an infinite holiness that only physical matter can contain. True, yes, we may need to put on a different pair of lenses to see it, but when we do, the spirit found within matter is way more deeper than anything else in the existence. Now you may say, well, how could that be? Well, as often is the case with such profound ideas, let me share an illustration. The late Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael Steinsaltz, he shared an illustration of this concept that actually I found particularly helpful. And this comes from the field of atomic energy. He said, listen, in the early morning of July 16, 1945, there were a few dozen men that gathered on the outskirts of the town Los Alamos in the deserts of New Mexico. These men were parties to the most guarded military secret of the time. It was called the Manhattan Project, America's concerted effort to research, develop, and build the world's first nuclear weapon. That morning was the Trinity test, which is the first ever testing of an explosive nuclear device. And at exactly 5:29 a.m., an enormous explosion went off, and a bright, multicolored flash, many times brighter than the sun, lit up the entire desert sky for as far as the eye can see. It was actually equivalent to 25 kilotons of TNT. The explosion rattled windows far, far away from the testing site. They said it was visible up to 200 miles away, and audible 50 miles away. Its frightening yellow-orange plume rushed into the sky, resulted in a mushroom-shaped cloud reaching 7.5 miles high. The scientists looked on with mixed feelings of accomplishment and horror, understanding that what they had just achieved would herald in the most devastating war that took place in history, but would also change the world forever. Because nuclear energy is the most powerful force known to man. But what is nuclear energy? It is the most material, physical, tangible thing in existence. It's actually a nucleus tapping the essence of matter itself. You may ask, well, how can the most basic matter have the most profound impact? How can the fissure or fusion of the tiniest material generate the greatest earth-shattering and heaven-piercing energy? You know why? Do you know how? Because God created the world in a manner that precisely and intentionally, that within the ordinary, inanimate, lifeless piece of physical matter, there is an unbound, unbelievable energy. And when untapped, no one knows it's there. But when tapped, the energy found within the matter itself can change everything, either for the better or for the worse. So if you can just figure out how to break the atom inside, or maybe to fuse two atoms together, there's no limit really to what you can produce. A fork or a cup may look lifeless, but there's limitless divinity, imbued energy within it. And though its darkness helps convey this message, we don't need to look at weapons of mass destruction to bring the point home. The idea actually exists in the most positive sense as well. And really, that's the story of life itself. We'll understand that of all things human, means everything that human beings can do, what is the most profound thing? The most profound is to procreate, to bring another human being into this world. It's a very deep spiritual accomplishment, but cannot be done by spiritual means, by thought, by feeling. Not even the loftiest ideas, not the most sensational motivational speech can do it. Only the physical union of a father and mother can make it happen. Now, through that physical union, a new soul is brought into this world. And the very character, the psyche, the physical makeup, the personality, and the temperament of the parents are transmitted to a new generation through their DNA. Simply, there is no other way. Physical matter matters most. In telling the Jewish people to make a sanctuary for me, God is telling us where to find him. Yes, God is everywhere, true. But where is he most? In an act of taking our own personal gold, silver, copper, and donating it to his temple, thereby making them divine. By helping another person in need, by making a blessing on food that we eat, we are actually demonstrating how everything in this world has in it a most profound soul from which the greatest light shines forth. And that's what the Mishkan, friends, is all about. And that's why we face Jerusalem when we pray. Because it's a city that's fashioned for God, characterized by its ancient stones lovingly hewn for the sake of this holy house. Taking the physical, taking the finite, making it a vehicle for God in this world. Yes, the temple is for us mortals to ascend. But the reason God says, make it for me, is because it's also the place where the abstract, the ethereal eternity of God can manifest and be harnessed into a tangible form. You know, the Rebbe actually frequently stressed that one of the most important and profound ways of serving God and bringing God into this world is by taking our unique talents, our abilities that God has given us, and putting them to use for God's sake. Sometimes one may wonder, hey, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm just going about my job, trying to get by. What can I possibly give? What can I contribute to society? What can I give to God? What does God possibly need from me? The Mishkan, friends, teaches us that giving to God doesn't mean coming up with some mind-blowing, life-altering spiritual epiphany. You know what it means? It means looking around you, looking at the car you drive, the table you eat, the living room, the sofa in your living room where you relax on, your professional life, and using everything you have to make a temple by living life for his sake. You're a good writer. You're a good singer. Use that to bring others closer to God. You're a good chef. Invite people over for Shabbat. Or send them a meal for someone who might be going through a hard time. You're a good listener. Or you have a wide network of friends. When you learn of someone in need, reach out. Make a difference in their life for the better. It's all those small little things that unleash our nuclear divine energy and that we can change and elevate the world, making it a godly place and bringing Mashiach closer. Let me conclude with a famous story that actually brings this message home, message to heart. They tell the story that took place in the time of the Spanish Inquisition. There was a certain Jewish converso from Portugal who moved from the holy to the holy city of Tzfat in Israel, very holy, mystical city. He was a God-fearing, simple Jewish person. He just faithfully attended services, didn't know much. He listened carefully to the rabbi's sermons, and it was 1 week that he sat transfixed as the rabbi actually discussed a very special showbread table they had in the Mishkan. It was a table that was in the tabernacle, which the Kohanim every weekend would place fresh bread. They baked the most beautiful bread, and they put 12 loaves of bread onto this table in the tabernacle, and it made a beautiful aroma. It stood there for a week, and the next week the Kohanim would eat it. It was called the Lechem Hapanim, and we read about it in this week's Torah portion. And the rabbi said, we're now in exile. We don't have a Mishkan. We don't have a tabernacle. So we really can't make this, we can't serve God with this great honor as they had in the Mishkan with the bringing this special bread to the holy temple. Well, this well-meaning Jew, he actually felt a pang for the divine presence over the loss of the opportunity of bringing this special bread to the holy temple. He had a plan. He went home. He said, my dear wife, why don't we bake 2 very special challah breads with the best flour, the best ingredients, and on Friday I will bring them to the synagogue, and I will open the ark, and when no one's there, I will put it near the Torah as a gift for God, and maybe God will take it and eat it. He was such a simple person. Sure enough, that Friday, the woman baked the most delicious, the best ingredients, the most beautiful challah. The husband brought it to the synagogue. Friday afternoon, no one was there. He opened the ark. He placed them inside. He said, God, this is the showbread table. Bread I'm bringing you here. Take it. I hope you accept it. He ran home and nobody saw. And he was sure that God's going to accept his gift. Later that day, another man entered the synagogue. This was the shamish. He was the synagogue caretaker. He used to come before every Shabbat, make sure the synagogue is all set, the Torahs are in the right place. Well, this was a very poor man. He didn't even have enough money for challah on his table. And he was very broken-hearted. He went up to the ark to pray, God, Father in heaven, I wish you would help me and send me challah for the Shabbat. And he poured his heart to the Creator. And he was shocked. He smelled the tantalizing aroma of this fresh challah bread coming out of the ark. He was curious. He opened it up and he couldn't believe the good fortune. God sent him 2 loaves of fresh challah bread straight down from heaven. He said, Master of the universe, he exclaimed in disbelief. Wow, you answered my prayers and gave me challah for Shabbos. Now you can imagine. That night, after services, the Jew from Spain waited for everyone to leave the synagogue because he wanted to sneak up to the ark to see if God took his bread. What happened to his offering, to his gift, and to his great joy? He opened up the ark and he found that the challahs were there. He said, God accepted my gift. He ran home and he shared the good news with his wife. She was so elated that she can bring a gift to God in this fashion. So the next week, and week after week, his wife would make the beautiful challah, and he would come Friday afternoon, put them in the ark, thinking that his special challah was eaten by God. Simple faith. And then the caretaker would always come Friday afternoon, and he would pray, God, send me challah. And he would always open the ark and find them there. And they were both happy. But, friends, one Friday afternoon, as the man was placing the challah in the ark, he was spotted by the rabbi, who happened to come early that day to prepare for his weekly serving. And the rabbi says, what exactly do you think you're doing there? He says, well, Rabbi, what do you mean? The rabbi says, why are you putting fresh challah into the ark near the Torah? The man says, Rabbi, what do you mean? My wife makes challah every week, and I bring it here for God to accept it, and they've been doing this now for several months. And by now, we're very pleased with this arrangement. God takes my challah every week. Rabbi, you were the one who spoke about a while back how we missed those days of the Holy Temple, and I wanted to do it, bring God this gift. And the rabbi says, foolish man, he berated him. Do you really think God, who doesn't eat or drinks, needs your challah? And at that moment, the shamish, the caretaker, comes in, and he went looking to the ark for his challah. And suddenly, they all understood what was going on. The man from Spain was devastated that God didn't really accept his gift all along. And the caretaker was devastated that his miraculous challah wasn't miraculous after all. And that night, a messenger from the Holy Arizal, very holy saint, came to this rabbi in a dream. He said, let me tell you something, Rabbi. Not since the destruction of the temple, close to 1700 or maybe 1500 years before, had God experienced such a pleasure as the sincerity from the wholehearted, wholesome gift that precious Jew brought to him. And now his innocence has been shattered and been taken away from him. And this action displeased God. See, friends, this story, its message is enlightening and empowering. Who amongst us can say the values of even the small things in life dedicated to God with purity of the heart? Our offerings and good deeds build temples all over the place, whether we know it or not. All those small little deeds, our moments of bringing gifts to God, our collective offerings will surely usher in the complete building of the third temple now. So may we all find ways to dedicate our gifts to God, our talents, our abilities, our resources, in whatever form they may be. And may they cause great joy in heaven. May they be a tremendous blessing in our personal lives and be a catalyst of true change in our personal journey in life. And may they be a source of blessing for peace and security to all of our brethren in the Holy Land of Israel. May God guard our brethren in Israel. and the world over from harm, and send us Mashiach in the merit of our good deeds, our actions, no matter how small they are. And may God protect the armed forces of Israel and the United States, wherever they may be. Amen, l'chaim, and Shabbat Shalom.